"I'm the leader of the caravan," said a dark-eyed bearded man. "I hold the power of life and death for every person I take with me. The desert is a capricious lady, and sometimes she drives men crazy." There were almost 200 people gathered there, and 400 animals, camels, horses, mules, and fowl. In the crowd were women, children, and a number of men with swords at their belts and rifles slung on their shoulders. The Englishman had several suitcases filled with books. There was a babble of noise, and the leader had to repeat himself several times for everyone to understand what he was saying. "There are a lot of different people here, and each has his own God. But the only God I serve is Allah, and in His name I swear I will do everything possible once again to win out over the desert. But I want each and every one of you to swear by the God you believe in that you will follow my orders no matter what. In the desert, disobedience means death." There was a murmur from the crowd. Each was swearing quietly to his or her own God. The boy swore to Jesus Christ. The Englishman said nothing, and the murmur lasted longer than a simple vow would have. The people were also praying to heaven for protection. A long note was sounded on a bugle, and everyone mounted up. The boy and the Englishman had bought camels and climbed uncertainly onto their backs. The boy felt sorry for the Englishman's camel, loaded down as he was with cases of books. "There's no such thing as a coincidence," said the Englishman, picking up the conversation where it had been interrupted in the warehouse. "I'm here because a friend of mine heard of an Arab who..." But the caravan began to move, and it was impossible to hear what the Englishman was saying. The boy knew what he was about to describe, though, the mysterious chain that links one thing to another. The same chain that caused him to become a shepherd, that caused his recurring dream, that had brought him to the city near Africa to find a king and to be robbed in order to meet the crystal merchant. The closer one gets to realizing his destiny, the more that destiny becomes his true reason for being, thought the boy. "Carter, when we moved to California, it was because I was following a reoccurring dream. The caravan moved toward the east. It traveled during the morning, halted when the sun was at its strongest, and resumed late in the afternoon. The boy spoke very little with the Englishman, who spent most of his time with these books. The boy observed in silence the progress of the animals and the people across the desert. Now everything quiet, different from how it was the day they had set out. Then there had been confusion and shouting, the cries of children, and the whining of animals, all mixed with the nervous orders of the guides and the merchants. But in the desert there was only the sound of the eternal wind and the hoofbeats of the animals. Even the guides spoke very little to one another. "I've crossed these sands many times," said one of the camel drivers one night, "but the desert is so huge and the horizon so distant that they make a person feel small, as if they should remain silent." The boy understood intuitively what he meant, even without ever having set foot in the desert before. Whenever he saw the sea or a fire, he fell silent, impressed by their elemental force. It's the same with the ocean. "I've learned things from the sheep, and I've learned things from the crystal," he thought. "I can learn something from the desert, too. It seems old and wise. The wind never stopped." And the boy remembered the day he had sat at the fort in Tarifa with the same wind blowing in his face. It reminded him of the wool from his sheep, his sheep who were now seeking food and water in the fields of Andalusia, as they always had. "They're not my sheep anymore," he said to himself, without nostalgia. "They must be used to their new shepherd, and have probably already forgotten me. That's good. Creatures like sheep that are used to traveling know about moving on." He thought of the merchant's daughter and was sure that she had probably married, perhaps to a baker or to another shepherd who could read and could tell her exciting stories. After all, he probably wasn't the only one. But he was excited at his intuitive understanding of the camel driver's common. Maybe he was also learning the universal language that deals with the past and the present of all people. Hunches, his mother used to call them. The boy was beginning to understand that intuition is really a sudden immersion of the soul into the universal current of life, where the histories of all people are connected, and we are able to know everything because it's all written there. "Maktab," the boy said, remembering the crystal merchant. The desert was all sand in some stretches and rocky in others. When the caravan was blocked by a boulder, it had to go around it. If there was a large rocky area, they had to make a major detour. If the sand was too fine for the animals' hooves, they sought a way where the sand was more sustainable. In some places, the ground was covered with the salt of dried-up lakes. The animals balked at such places, and the camel drivers were forced to dismount and unburden their charges. The drivers carried the freight themselves over such treacherous footing, and then reloaded the camels. If a guide were to fall ill or die, the camel drivers would draw lots and appoint a new one. But all this happened for one basic reason. No matter how many detours and adjustments it made, the caravan moved toward the same compass point. Once obstacles were overcome, it returned to its course, sighting on a star that indicated the location of the oasis. When people saw that star shining in the morning sky, they knew they were on the right course towards the water, palm trees, shelter, and other people. It was the only thing the Englishman who was unaware of all of this. He was, for the most part, immersed in reading his books. The boy, too, had his book, and he tried to read it during the first few days of the journey. But he found it much more interesting to observe the caravan and listen to the wind. As soon as he had learned to know his camel better and to establish a relationship with him, he threw the book away. Although the boy had developed a superstition that each time he opened the book he would learn something important, he decided it was an unnecessary burden. He became friendly with the camel driver who traveled alongside him. At night they sat around the fire, and the boy related to the driver his adventures as a shepherd. During one of these conversations, the driver told of his own life. "I used to live near El Karyams," he said. "I had my orchard, my children, and a life that would change not at all until I died. One year, when the crop was the best ever, we all went to Mecca, and I satisfied the only unmet obligation in my life. I could die happily, and that made me feel good. One day the earth began to tremble, and the Nile overflowed its banks. It was something that I thought could only happen to others, never to me. My neighbors feared they would lose all their olive trees in the flood, and my wife was afraid that we would lose our children. I thought that everything I owned would be destroyed. The land was ruined, and I had to find some other way to earn a living. So now I'm a camel driver. But that disaster taught me to understand the word of Allah. People need not fear the unknown if they are capable of achieving what they need and want." I'm going to have to pause and do another video because this one's getting too big. I love you.